Any further discussion, items 34 through 38? Councilman Roias.
Madam President, I rise tonight to speak on agenda item 38, perhaps with the weight of history on my mind, knowing that the fight for justice and dignity is not new to the city of Providence. More than a century ago, Mayor Patrick J. McCarthy, a proud Irish immigrant, became the first immigrant-born mayor of our city, a man who knew firsthand the struggles of immigrants in this country. He fought for working families, the disenfranchised, and those seeking a better life in the land that too often treated them as second-class citizens. McCarthy understood something we cannot afford to forget. Immigrants are not the enemy. They are the foundation. They build our cities, our communities, and our future. Yet today we are witnessing a government that treats them as criminals, as threats, as people whose rights and very existence can be erased with the stroke of a pen or the slam of a cell door. But Madam President, I rise tonight fully aware that as a local official, I do not have jurisdiction over domestic or foreign affairs. I also recognize that resolutions are introduced all the time, often dismissed as symbolic, just words on the page. This resolution before us tonight, in my view, is a call to our shared moral responsibility, a moment that demands more than words. This is about who we are as a government body, as a city that values justice, and as a nation that must decide whether it will uphold its principles or betray them. I've spoken with many of you, and I know we share a deep and growing fear about the direction of our country is headed. This fear is not abstract. It is real, cutting through every neighborhood in our city. And let me be clear, this is not an exaggeration. We are witnessing a federal government that has abandoned the rule of law, turning immigration enforcement into a weapon of political persecution, targeting students, activists, and legal residents simply because they dare to speak out. This resolution is a stand against a regime that is silencing dissent, criminalizing immigrants, tearing down due process to shreds like a second-rate dictatorship. This resolution is about Mahmoud Khalil, a lawful permanent resident, a Columbia University graduate, and a soon-to-be father who, on March 8th, was taken by ICE agents.
You're going to be under arrest. So turn around.
Okay,
Stop
let's
resisting.
not.
Stop resisting.
Okay, he's not resisting. He's giving me his phone, okay? He's not, I understand, he's not resisting.
Put your arm
Like,
There's no need for this.
Don't worry about it. You're going to have to come with us. Don't worry.
I'm coming with you, no worries.
No one's resisting, no one's getting worked up.
you guys really don't need to be doing all of that.
It's fine, it's fine. Maybe it's fine.
حبيبي كيف بدي اتصل فيك؟
Take Amy. Call Amy. She'll be
Okay. Hi, Amy. Yeah, they just like handcuffed him and took him. I don't know what to do. And what should I do? I don't know. Nor.
Without a warrant, handcuffed, forced into an unmarked car as his pregnant wife stood helpless and thrown into a detention center. Now he faces deportation, all for daring to speak out. If we do nothing, he may never see the birth of his first child. A man who built his life here, followed the rules, and stood up for what he believed in, now caged like a criminal for the crime of having a moral compass. This is not justice, this is fascism. But Mahmoud's case is not an isolated one. Leika Cordia, a Palestinian student from the West Bank, arrested on dubious visa allegations, targeted for her activism. Ranjanice Serene Balsin, an Indian doctoral student, a Fulbright scholar from Columbia University, forced into self-deportation simply for participating in student activism. Fabian Schmidt, a lawful permanent resident green card holder, detained at Logan International Airport, despite holding valid documentation, now being held right here in our own backyard in Central Falls at the Wyatt Detention Facility. These are not mistakes, Madam President. These are deliberate acts of intimidation. And they come against the backdrop of a moment that should weigh heavily on all of us. Just this Tuesday, Israel launched airstrikes across the Gaza Strip, killing more than 400 Palestinians, 183 children, 94 women, 34 elderly people, and 125 men. At least 678 others have been injured, many clinging to life while others remain trapped beneath the rubble, waiting for help that may never come. I refuse to follow the same Western narrative that reduces them to numbers, as if their humanity needs to be proven. They were never just numbers. They were already mothers and fathers, daughters and sons, neighbors and friends, and behind every number is a name, a life, a story, a future stolen, and we owe them more than silence. And here in the United States, our government is detaining and deporting student activists, many of whom have been vocal in their advocacy for Palestinian rights. So let's not pretend this is by accident. The same administration enabling and excusing these bombings is the same disappearing student activists in the dead of night. The same administration that refuses to demand restraint is the one using immigration enforcement to silence political dissent. We cannot let this happen. This past weekend, Trump invoked the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, an archaic wartime provision used only 3 times in U.S. history, during the War of 1812, World War I, and World War II. Its most infamous use leading to the internment of Japanese, Italian, and German Americans. Now it is being used not to defend national security, but to justify mass deportation under the guise of an immigration invasion. Let's be clear. This is not about security. This is about power. The administration, in blatant defiance of the courts, rounded up individuals, accused them without evidence of gang affiliation, and deported them in secret, not to their home country, to El Salvador, to a prison notorious for torture, forced labor, and human rights abuses, a place where no journalists are allowed access, no independent monitors, and no oversight. Among those disappeared could be children as young as 14 years old. No trial, no legal representation, no chance to challenge the accusations against them. This is not just an attack on immigrants. This is an attack on the very idea of justice. If the president can invoke wartime powers in peacetime and wield them as he pleases, then who among us is safe? Some argue that this is necessary because we face a border crisis. That is a lie. We must reject the false choice between security and humanity. Migrants seeking a better life is not an invasion. People fleeing violence are not enemies of the state. The answer to a flawed immigration system is not authoritarian crackdowns, but comprehensive reform. And we must also reject the false choice that says we, as Providence City Councilors, must remain silent on matters of justice beyond our borders. Local governance is not just about infrastructure and city services. It's about the values, about the moral fabric of the neighborhoods we serve. The people of Providence do not live in a vacuum. Their fears are real, their futures are at stake, and their struggles do not stop at the edge of a city map. To tell me to ignore these injustices is to tell me to ignore the people I represent. We look back at the internment of Japanese, Italian, and German Americans with shame, and yet today we watch history repeat itself. I refuse to stand by while this happens. Silence is not neutrality, it is surrender. And so I urge my colleagues tonight to pass this resolution, because here in these chambers, in this city of Providence, we don't waver, we don't bow to fear, and we don't look the other way. We stand with immigrants. We stand for justice now and always. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Counselor.